When a Hausa elder died, the home they left behind gave the family three choices. The first choice was the family deciding that they're going to keep living in that house, they're going to maintain it, and they're going to make sure that it is in really good condition so that they can be able to pass it down to the next generation exactly the way it was passed down to them. The second choice they had was to either dismantle the house completely and use every piece of the building material and recycle the mud, the timber, the thatch, in every aspect of the roof to pretty much go ahead and build something entirely new. Something that served the current family unit and what their needs truly were. So this family was part of the original family lineage. The third choice they had was to simply just walk away and do nothing, because maybe due to different circumstances, the family ended up shrinking. And what that meant is that the house could then peacefully just disintegrate and return back to earth so that the remaining family members could pretty much use the land and farm it again. In this third process, if you look at it, there were no demolition costs, no toxic waste, and truly there was no burden on the children or the family members who were going to think of what they have to do with the home. And so if you look at this, there were no demolition costs, no toxic waste, no burden on the children. And if you think about it, it wasn't poverty in architecture truly. This wasn't the Hausa people building badly because they didn't know any better. This was a 10-generation plan that was built into the building material themselves. So today I want us to unpack how that philosophy didn't just shape a house, but it ended up shaping an entire city. And I want us to look at the current universal problem that we're all facing in the housing system today. Here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. When you think about building a home, or if you already own one, how far into the future are you really thinking based on the architecture design choices that you're making today? Are you thinking about yourself? Are you thinking about your children and maybe your grandchildren? Here's what I've noticed based on our modern lifestyle system and the family structure. Most of us, if we're honest, we are thinking about one or maybe two generations ahead. And that's not a criticism to anyone watching this video or any modern families. I think it's more of a survival mechanism because truthfully, a lot of us are not just trying to put a roof over our heads. We're trying our hardest to leave something behind for at least the next two generations because resources are tight. The vision today of architecture and the way we build can only go as far as the bank loan allows us in many cases. And so this is why I'm saying it's not truly a criticism, but it's just a realization of the modern challenges that we all are facing. But I want to offer a different perspective today because as I've been going through into Hausa architecture and studying the ways these communities built their homes, their compounds, their cities, I've started to realize that we've lost something enormous. We've lost the idea that a single architecture decision made by one person in one family could truly shape an entire city. And that is exactly what happened in the Hausa communities across West Africa. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with one family and look at the Hausa family unit. I've been deeply studying the specific elements of the family unit and how it was formed from pre-Islamic era, which is the pre-jihad era. And I want to be clear about that context of the family unit and its dynamic. The family unit was polygamous in nature, where one husband had multiple wives and each wife had their own dedicated space within the compound. I understand this differs greatly from the nuclear family that most of us gravitate towards today. I want you to set the social conversation aside for a moment and just follow the architectural logic that I want to share with you, because there's some profound lessons that I want all of us to talk about and not be swayed away by the social conversation around marriage and whether we should be a nuclear family or we should be a polygamous family. Now, because the polygamous family unit created a very specific architectural challenge, the husband had to ensure that every wife, every child from every wife was properly housed, was properly resourced, they were properly cared for within one compound. And when you look at the layout of the original Hausa home from this sketch that I made based on the documentation of J.C. Morton's work from the book Hausa Architecture, which I'll link in the description box, you can see exactly how that challenge was solved. The man's house sat at one part of the compound, and then each wife had their own separate home. They had their own separate kitchen, they had their own separate food store, but everyone lived together. Everyone contributed to the household economy, but everyone also had their own spaces, they had their own dignity, their own autonomy within the family structure. And here's where it really gets very interesting, especially when you look at the succession line. The Hausa have a very deliberate system for deciding who would be the lead of the family lineage. The firstborn son of the first wife was first in line in terms of the succession line. And then if something happened to him, leadership was then passed down to the firstborn son of the second wife, and so on, just down the line, as you can see I have illustrated in this diagram. Now, why does this matter for architecture and the way we build individual homes? It means that whoever is building and whoever is the head of the family is not just building for themselves. They must build with full awareness that after them, there would be someone else. And after that person, someone else again. This means that they built for lineage, not just a lifetime. And this is how a family then became a city. Let me just paint for you this picture vividly. Here's the full growth progress of how a single home evolved into Gandu, then Sasa, then Ward, and then Birni. Now, let me break each of these just bit by bit so that we truly understand what we're looking at. When I was looking at what happens when a lineage actually grows and it moves from these growth stages, genuinely blew my mind. To think and know that the Hausa family unit was this intentional, that they even developed names, building knowledge, and architectural ideas centered on these family growth units was completely beyond intentional, if you ask me. This is real architecture. It's rooted in science and the understanding of humanity at such a great depth. They literally built an entire sophisticated system of architecture from just one single family unit. Now let's look at each of these units. When the individual family unit, which started with a father, multiple wives, and then children, that is the single family unit, which is pretty much the polygamous unit. When that unit grew, it turned into what the Hausa community called Gandu or Gandae. And when the children of these multiple wives grew up and started having families of their own, those extended family members began building alongside and around their original home, not far away, not across the town or cities as a lot of us do today, where the children would buy land far away or sometimes somewhat near their parents. Their Hausa community, if you look at this setup, they actually just built alongside and around the original home, not far away. They built right there in that compound and extended it outward, and this is what is called Gandu, or in plural it's called Gandai. It was an architectural expression of the family growth, because the extended family was still intentional about being housed together, sustaining their lives together, and also just building together. Because if you think about it, this is how you start to build social capital, where they were not fully dependent on financial capital to build a home, but they really dependent on the community and each other to erect homes and to continue growing. Now, let's look at the next layer past Gandu. What happened when Gandu or Gandai started to grow? Because the family typically just keeps growing and married children of the Gandu start having children of their own, what happens is that Gandu starts to overflow, and these smaller marital units begin to slightly separate, but not enough to break the family connection. This separation, however, starts to give each unit its own identity and space. And these sub-compounds are typically separated by short walls. And these units of subdivisions are what are now called Sasa. Now, these short walls were not necessarily for privacy or anything, or to separate the Sasa from each other, but they mainly just served the demarcation purposes. So the short walls were only used for demarcation purposes. From the Sasa, over more and more generations, a ward emerged. A ward was a large unified compound of families now sharing the same ancestry. The ward had a leader who was called a ward head, and their responsibility was not just to serve themselves, but to hold the entire lineage together. The way the ward head thought and how they made decisions was shaped on how those decisions also impacted many generations. So they were very strategic in the way they were thinking, in the way they were making decisions, and how those decisions were actually influencing each and every family unit within that ward, and how they were either helping those specific family units to continue to grow and to continue to find economic value. And so their role was to steward the whole family tree and not just a branch they happened to sit on. The formation of the palace happened when some of the wards grew and became very powerful, to the point that they became the seats of the kings. This is where now palaces started to enter the picture, because of how some of these wards just grew so powerful, and the leadership of, let's say, maybe the ward head was very strong, and it really helped to keep the family unit together. And so when you start to talk about like building generational wealth and knowledge and all this, it really happened within the ward, and some of these wards truly emerged to become community leaders. Now, the formation of the Hausa, Birni, which are the walled cities, happened when enough of these wards and these entire family lineages gathered together in one place. You now start to see the emergence of the Hausa Benin. The Hausa Benin is, like I said, is pretty much the walled city. It is very sophisticated, organized, and enclosed by these exquisite mud walls. And in Hausa they call them Gandu. Each city is typically led by a hierarchy that had grown generation by generation from a single husband and wife and their children, who were visionary about building one family, one compound, and one decision centered on building with intention over generations. This was not done just by accident. This is what we now call architecture planning in the modern sense, if you think about it at scale. And if you compare to what modern city planners do today, they don't even attempt to get anywhere close to where the Hausa communities were. And I understand it's because the current market and system that we're building on is heavily skewed, and it has changed greatly. But if you think about how a lot of us spend almost a lifetime studying and becoming professions, I would have loved to see that we try and work towards this. So if anyone ever says Africa lives in mud huts and we're primitive and have no concept of science, architectural planning, or sophisticated knowledge of housing and architecture, please point them to this resource. I would confidently argue that Africans were way ahead of time, and we still are, and we have an opportunity to tap into this incredible wisdom now. And here is a glimpse of how we can start to actually do that in a much more realistic sense. The whole process starts with embracing alternative building methods like building with mud. Now, here's why I think building with mud and the renewal strategy is very critical right now. Here's a question I kept coming back to as I went through this whole research. Why did the Hausa build with mud? Well, it seems they understood something that I think we almost completely lost today, which is the spirit of renewal. When a Hausa family built with mud and fortified the mud with additional organic earth-based materials, they were making a very conscious choice, not just an economic one or a philosophical one. Think back to those three options I opened with when it comes to what happens to the architecture of the original head of the family when it starts to pass down from one generation to the next. The first option we had initially discussed is that the next family can inherit and maintain the architecture, meaning if the family wanted to stay in the home, it could be maintained and modified across generations, and the knowledge of how to build, how to repair the architecture and expand it, that knowledge was passed down right along the property itself. You didn't just inherit the house, you inherited the understanding of how to keep it alive and also how to pass it to the next generation. If you look at the second option that we had discussed, it was the option to dismantle the house that was passed on to the next generation and you reuse the building materials of the architecture. So in this sense, if the family wanted to live and rebuild elsewhere, they could dismantle the home and take everything with them, the mud, the timber, the thatch, all the organic materials that were available from the original head of the home. They were all reusable. There was no waste, no demolition cost. And then the third option that we had also discussed was this option of the return to earth, where the home will be allowed to just naturally fall apart and the land is then reused. So in this sense, if the family maybe for one reason or another shrunk, if there was, let's say, there was loss or illness or tragedy, the house didn't become a burden to the next generation that were already maybe constrained in terms of numbers and resources, but it simply just gently returned to the ground. The walls just gradually degraded, the mud dissolved back to soil, and that soil then meant that the land could now be used to either farm or to be built on by the next family lineage that was there. I want you to think about what it means to design a building that is humble enough to give the land back when it is actually done. If you compare this to concrete, to steel, to the way most of us build today, when a concrete building is abandoned, it doesn't return to earth. It becomes a cost and a liability to the next generation that is there. Someone has to pay to demolish it. Someone has to deal with the rubble. The land underneath is often very compromised. That turns into environmental debt that is handed from one generation to the next. And if you compare that and you see the way Hausa did things, the Hausa didn't just choose mud because it was available. They chose mud because it was truly renewable and malleable, and its diversity truly was at the center of supporting the growing families and giving them room to equally find suitable architectural solutions as the family grew and it evolved. Here's my critique to the modern housing system and the way we build today, and why I think this makes such a strong case for us to start returning to indigenous ways of building. Modern gated housing estates are often rows of identical homes in a grid. I want to be careful here because I don't want this to come across as pure judgment, but I want to be honest as well with you. There's something a little arrogant about the way we build today. And I say arrogant not just to offend you, but I say it because I think it's the most accurate word. When we build primarily for status, when we choose concrete because it looks permanent, because it signals success, because it says, I made it, are we really thinking about the people who come after us? When I was creating the diagrams of this video, I did something that made me laugh at first. And then I sat with it, and after sketching the original Hausa home unit, I copy-pasted it and duplicated it over and over to show how the Gandu, the Sasa, grew out into words and into palaces and into Birni cities, because it would have truly been really time consuming for me to create multiple individual homes as they truly were in the Hausa cities. But when I did this, I realized that the copy-paste method is almost exactly to what most professionals do today in the modern housing development. Now, look at the old Zaria city. You see here, every compound is different. Every Gandu, every word has different shapes, different orientation, different relationships to the streets and each other. And that's because each one grew from a different family, a different story, a different set of needs and resources. And now, if you contrast that with a modern gated community, one house model seems to be made into hundreds of copies, and the variations maybe are just in the different colors, slightly different doors. But if you truly look at this, it doesn't give people room to express themselves fully, like the way the old city of Zaria, you can see how there's so much uniqueness and diversity. It doesn't give room for people to express themselves through architecture, and more importantly, it doesn't give future generations the flexibility to adapt, to change, or to make these houses their own without spending a fortune on renovation. I would say the Hausa family truly took time to think about flexibility, to think about renewal, and about the people they were leaving behind. I think we could truly and greatly learn from this. So here's my takeaway and what I think we all should do next. Let me start by asking you a question. When you think about the architecture decisions you're making right now, the home you're building, the community you're choosing, the materials you're selecting, how many generations ahead are you really thinking of? Are you thinking about the flexibility you're leaving for your grandchildren in terms of the architectural decisions and the building materials that you're picking? Are you thinking about what happens to the land when your family is done with it? The Hausa communities I'm studying did not just build houses, they built systems, living, breathing systems that could grow with a family, adapt to the changing needs, and when the time came, those houses could gracefully return to earth. That is what indigenous African architecture has to teach the world, and that is exactly why I keep doing this research. So as I wrap up, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who has been supporting this channel, the members, the donors, everyone who shows up every time a new video drops. You are funding something real. You are helping preserve knowledge that the world genuinely needs. If you are new here and you'd like to join the village and become a member, please like this video, consider becoming a channel member, and come and visit the full archive of African indigenous architecture on our website, which is africantraditionalarchitecture.com. I'll also link the J.C. Morton's book in the description box. It is publicly available on the Internet Archives, and it's a brilliant read. I would like to encourage you to go and check it out. But until next time, cheers everyone.